Olá a todos, meu nome é Miguel Magalhães e comigo tenho o Chris Lennon, presidente da Empowered Startups, uma aceleradora internacional que tem ajudado founders internacionais a entrarem numa série de mercados, nomeadamente no Canadá, onde a incubadora foi criada, e agora em Portugal, onde está desde 2019, e vamos conhecer um pouco melhor o trabalho que tem estado a desenvolver. Chris, thank you very much for joining us and for being here with us. My first question is, I know you created Empowered Startups right after the financial crisis in 2008. At that time, what led you to create a global accelerator, and what kind of challenges were you seeing that justified the creation of organizations such as this one?
Well, back in 2008, it wasn't a master plan. It was really started by the founders, one of whom I was a longtime friend and advisor to and lawyer for. But really, it started by just them starting their own companies and ventures, and then over time realizing they kind of had this venture studio because they had so many projects that they were working on that they were trying to develop. We didn't really come into our own as in the current form until about 2014. And that's when we were actually tasked by the Canadian government to go out internationally and recruit founders, but a specific type of founder, a founder previously experienced with past success and also high net worth with the funds available to seed new opportunities. At that time it was in Canada. So they kind of tasked us there because our firm had the experience of actually starting things ourselves and building things and spinning them out ourselves. And we'd also already operated in the international marketplace, so we had an idea of how to go and find these people through, at the time, it was sort of the Hong Kongs and Dubais and places like that. Demographics changed a lot over time, but that's kind of the origin story.
And in 2019, you decided to come to Portugal and start your operation there. What was kind of the learnings that you had from the Canada example that when you thought of another markets that might make sense to try to replicate the same recipe, or to at least try to do some of the things that you were doing well? Why did Portugal appear in that conversation?
Again, it was a bit of luck. As in startup, there's always a little bit of luck. I mean, it's always a combination of hard work and skill, but you got to be in the right place in the right time. And we went to France first. So one of the founders is actually a French citizen. His father had lived and worked in France for Interpol for years, and through that connection, once I guess it was the French consulate in Canada caught on with what we were doing in Canada, they attracted us to take a shot at building something similar in France. And we started that, but then through our presence in France, quickly realized that Portugal was an even bigger opportunity. And to be honest, I wasn't that involved in the first project in Portugal. It was just sort of like a little test project that was something that presented itself to us an opportunity. But then as we started to expand to more universities and more projects, I very, very quickly became involved. And I've been very actively involved ever since that time in about 2019.
I can imagine that when you started this program back in Canada, the idea was we need to have a more robust innovation ecosystem. And so if we want to promote what is being done in Portugal, we have everything to gain from attracting what is being done overseas and get these know-how, these best practices, and apply them to essential industries for the economy. What was the reasoning with Portugal and the opportunity for Portugal, especially being a market where the concept of startups was quite new, an opportunity that you thought it was similar, especially in the European context?
So first on the similarities, I mean, Canada and Portugal are both sort of thought of often as good pilot markets. Canada is often considered a great place to run your pilot of a new technology before selling into the United States. And we found that Portugal has similar characteristics, a fairly unified demographic, but small enough that you can kind of test new things before you expand into elsewhere in Europe. And then the other point is we need to be going into markets where we think we can actually deliver value, because there needs to be a reason for people to work with us. And Portugal seemed to have some of that mix, because the niche that we have, unlike just any incubator or foundry, is that everything we do and every startup that we assist to start is always involved and connected to innovation going on at a university or polytechnic. And so that's what we've been doing in Canada for years. And once we got on the ground in Portugal, we realized Portugal also had a vast network of very quality research going on at institutions all across the country. And the thing that was a little bit different, but even a bigger opportunity, is that we discovered that in Portugal, you also have a lot of these very quality research institutions outside of the two main metropolitan centers, and they're actually craving for industry involvement to try to help them create a bit of a startup or industry scene that can allow students to not exit the school and also exit the community, but maybe be able to stay in place. And so that's where we kind of came in and saw a big potential.
One of the greatest services that you provide is these mobility programs where you kind of do the essential steps that an international founder needs to integrate within a certain market, within its culture. Mm-hmm. What are kind of the main challenges that a founder faces and that you help when he tries to bring a company that he has already created or wants to establish in a certain country? What are kind of the steps that he faces, especially when he comes to Portugal, and how do you help them?
So I would preface that by saying they come to us because there are otherwise potential challenges, and that's really what we assist them with. Think of it as most of the founders that we work with could start a new business anywhere in the world, but they're choosing to do it in Portugal, partly because they partnered with us. But what they really need is not so much the knowledge of how to start a new startup, but it's how to start a new startup in the new jurisdiction. So we are able to get them on the ground, introduce them to the innovation ecosystem at the universities. A lot of them eventually become angels or VCs in their own right, and they just want to be able to plug into the ecosystem here. You know, a lot of our founders come from Silicon Valley, so it's not like we're teaching them how to do startup. It's that we're connecting them and showing them how to get in on the ground and make an impact in Portugal.
And what kind of success story over these last 6 years have you seen of a company that through your services established itself here and is right now conducting operations from here to the rest of the world?
I think our success is more on the volume and the impact it's having for Portuguese residents and students and citizens. And we always try to approach what we're doing from that perspective. Because again, we're working with international founders that could go anywhere, but they're choosing to be here, and we want the immediate impacts that we're providing to be felt by the population. And so I guess the biggest testament I would have is the feedback that we get from the universities we've been working with, and one that I had just recently from a vice rector at Coimbra, is because he told me that he's actually using our program in a way that we had never intended, but he's using it as a way to get some of his very skilled and accomplished researchers, academics, to get their feet wet in interacting with industry for the first time, which of course professors and researchers are being called on to do more and more all the time. A lot of the European Horizon funds require matching funds, just like in Canada. We've seen that for the past decade. So to get more funding for the research you want to do, it really helps to have the ability to do applied research in conjunction with industry. And that's where we come in. I mean, I could give you little anecdotal stories of the founder who was previously with Sun Microsystems, and he started something innovative, or attempted to start something innovative in cybersecurity focused on the home market. But once he got on the ground here, he also started investing in other companies. And I just caught up with him at the SIM conference last week, and he said to me, the initial project I had here, I sort of thought as a test project, not sure it's going to work, but I knew it would get me into Portugal. Now I think there might be something there, and so I'm looking to hire a couple engineers and start building out the team around that. So really, it's the trickle-on effects. It's not just the first project or the first startups that started. It's all the other things that get created when you bring people to a country with expertise and the drive to start many things, because they don't just start one thing, they start multiple things.
But I'm curious that in your perspective, when you oversee the people that you are working with, what are some of the success measures that you look? Because especially when you compare the Portuguese ecosystem with Canada or even the US, which is what everyone has as a benchmark, you have really good research, but you still don't have that big connection between funding of projects directly from the universities to then help them, or a project that appears in university to have a smoother transition from the university context to the market context. So you think that one of the measures of like placing these founders here is kind of easing that process of a really impactful and with a project with great potential having an easier path from going from an academic background to the real world?
Absolutely. So the key metrics we look at internally to evaluate ourselves early days is the actual dollar value of foreign direct investment that we're bringing directly into applied research at universities and polytechnics. And then we also look at the number of students, typically master's or PhD students, that are getting the opportunity to interact with these sophisticated, highly qualified investor entrepreneurs and getting industry project experience. Some of them will likely go on and become the first hires, in many of these companies. Otherwise, it's sort of, a volume. How are we bringing great people to all the interior regions of Portugal, not only Porto and Lisbon, where we are bringing some people as well, but can we have an impact up in Covinhã or up in Ceia at Polytechnic of Guarda, both of which are institutions we're bringing quite a number of projects to, and arguably their students get more value out of it because they don't have as many opportunities to interact with industry on applied research projects.
And from the view of the founders and their journey, do they immediately when they come here, are they already with that mindset of my goal here is to create these relationships with universities, or is it a feedback that from your experience here in Portugal, you say that if you want to integrate and get the best benefit from this ecosystem, that's the best way to start, or they usually have other priorities once they think about the Portuguese market as a way or as a place where they could come to?
So every one of the founders we work with would have as one of their priorities working with an institution, a university or polytechnic, because that's one of the requirements on how we've modeled our program. So it's possible we will talk to founders that want to come to Portugal and create a subsidiary outside of that market, and in that case, we don't get involved. Like that's just, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not where we deliver the most value. But to the topic of priorities, almost all of our founders also are always faced with competing priorities. So what they're starting with us in Portugal is usually one of a number of things that they still have currently, that they're pursuing. The others typically being in international markets. And so they all have their own reasons for why they want to work with us and do this. Some want to get on the ground running really, really quickly in Portugal. Others just kind of want to start to build a network there and then figure out how they can start to tap into their international sales channels once their prototype starts to develop. It's varied, but almost all of them are constantly balancing competing priorities, but have to be and are always interested in investing and partnering with universities and polytechnics to develop innovation in Portugal. And that's a key thing for us, that everything that's developed through this program stays in Portugal, and the mind and management of the companies are to be developed in Portugal. You can export and sell anywhere in the world, but this is about building Portuguese-based companies.
One of the topics that has been discussed when you discuss the innovation strategy of Portugal as a country, it's sometimes hard to identify which are the clear industries where the country is betting, because you want to be good in everything, and especially when you are such a recent innovation ecosystem, it's not always immediate that you can clearly identify that these are the 4 or 5 areas where I want to be the best. Do you think that bringing this outside knowledge of these founders from here can help identify what are those areas and where can we be better, and especially improve Portugal at a university and academic context in things such as the development of patents or having bigger and better intellectual property than any project or company that's created here can build on?
That's absolutely one of the goals of this, is to bring expertise and domain experts that can add additional value. And yes, I think they will help to identify the areas of focus, but I think they'll always do it in sort of a ground up way. I'm not a big believer in that it's easy from a top down approach to kind of identify what are the big opportunities before you've built a critical mass of expertise or startups in an industry. So what we're always working on, but it's always an ongoing journey, is attempting to bring more and more startups and founders with expertise and figure out where to place them, so that over time we're building little clusters of innovation. Maybe University of Barra Interior is focused on kind of med tech and other things, but then we have these little clusters of innovation all around the country, where we've brought a number of different experts, also investment, and of course the universities already have their expertise in the world of academia, and together we're able to start commercializing more innovation. That's the end goal.
Right now, in the current status of the world, I think innovation hasn't been as politicized as it is today, especially in the things going on between the US and Europe and China. And Portugal has been a country that has really benefited from the globalized world and attracting talent from overseas to here, and even Portuguese talent going overseas and showcasing what is being done here. Do you think that the current status and this current war, where some countries are trying to be more protective of their economies or of their industries, can have a negative impact on what's being done here in Portugal by being part of Europe?
So it's definitely going to have an impact because it's shaking things up. But I actually, if we weather the next few years of uncertainty, which I think we all know what we're talking about, I actually think it is an opportunity for countries like Canada and Portugal to maybe focus a little bit more on sort of their grander industrial policy, and not just be reliant on the international partnerships that they have, particularly with one big country in North America. And I've already seen from your Prime Minister, a call for an increased focus on the defense industry and aerospace and things like that. And we're seeing the same in Canada. And I think that's great, because we can go and help recruit experts in that area to come and partner with the experts that are already here in Portugal and actually build innovation in the country. It's the same task we're taking in Canada to try to build more of a defense industry in Canada. 30 years ago, we used to contribute to the space program in a pretty profound way. We built the Canadarm. I don't see why Canada and Portugal can't have significant innovative developments that have impacts like that again in this somewhat new international situation, call it that.
And I think one of the challenges that has emerged as well is that I think sometimes it's really hard to communicate innovation, and often one of the reasons why this new current situation is appearing is that sometimes people don't perceive the benefit that a globalized world or a globalized economy can have on a country, for example, such as Portugal, because often the international founders that come here, you have always that narrative that they have, for example, raised cost of living or raised other things. What can, especially from a media side, but especially from a communication side, what can be done to better showcase the impact that some of these international founders and international organizations are bringing here in improving what's happening in Portugal and actually the competitiveness of our economy?
Key message, if I could provide a message back, it's that over time we often meet people on the ground here that always say, how can you help us with our problems? Or what are the problems that you see? And I say, I think people here are overly critical and overly self-deprecating. We wouldn't be bringing founders here if they didn't want to be here. So sure, every ecosystem and country has its little peculiarities that nag at people, but Portugal's been a welcoming ecosystem to invest in innovation, and that's why we're growing. So give yourselves a small pat on the back and say people want to be here and they want to innovate here. That's where we come in.
In terms of roadmap for empowered startups, what kind of things will be working during the next year?
So we're trying to continue to grow somewhat exponentially in Portugal. We're also expanding to Australia, and that also comes out of sort of an increasing desire of people to refocus. Because we also, you probably know, but we operate in the United States, but we're now having an increasing number of people that are saying, I'm not sure I want to develop anything in the United States right now. What else is of option to me? And Australia is one that time and time again has been presented to us, and we finally decided, okay, time to take the plunge there and start a little pilot in Australia. But I think our focus will be Canada, Portugal primarily, and our test project in Australia over the next couple of years.
Chris, thank you for joining us. It was lovely talking to you.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, very great.